Hello BookTube, this is Weekly Reads. This reading week covers December 26th, 2025 through January 1st, 2026. I started my reading week with a reread of Weavers, Scribes, and Kings by Amanda H. Podany. This is a new history of the ancient Near East that covers the lifespan of cuneiform writing, which was invented thousands of years ago in the city of Uruk, which is in the southern area of Mesopotamia, a region of what is now Iraq that is between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Cuneiform writing became the dominant writing form for this region, as well as expanding into what is now western Iran and west into what is now Syria and the Levant, as well as north into what is now Turkey. The Hittites, the one of the dominant peoples in Anatolia, adapted cuneiform writing to write their own language. And also south into Egypt, even though they had developed their own writing system, hieroglyphics. Akkadian, the language of region of Mesopotamia north of Uruk, became the lingua franca for this region during several stretches of time where the various kingdoms of the ancient Near East were in diplomatic contact, which is covered in this book, as well as Podany's earlier book, Brotherhood of Kings. So I read this book back in 2022, shortly after it came out, and wrote a review of it. And I really enjoyed the book at the time. And it was, I think, my favorite book of 2022. And until 2025, I had not reread it. I planned on rereading Weaver, Scribes, and Kings for Historathon 2025. And when I started to read it, I quickly realized that I wasn't in the mood for it, so I set it aside. And then as I was formulating my reading plan for December, which was going to be very heavily focused on Bell Redemptions, my term for giving more looks at a book that I had previously set aside, that this book was one of the books that I was thinking about adding to the pile. But I was also concerned that I wouldn't be able to get to it because my focus for Bell Redemption December was more heavily focused on fiction, poetry, and drama, which did turn out rather successful, I must say, even though I didn't get to necessarily every one that I wanted to, or every book that I wanted to. But as circumstances would have it, I did manage to get to Weaver, Scribes, and Kings before the end of 2025. Unfortunately, I still wasn't in the mood for it. I managed to finish it, but it didn't work for me as much as it did the first time I read it, which is usual for me. I am typically more critical of books when I reread them, that I'll notice not just things I had noticed, but those things tend to reflect a bit more poorly on the book than not, which is rather annoying. So ultimately, I didn't enjoy the reread, annoyingly. So that's that. So after Weaver, Scribes, and Kings, I reread Native Guard by Natasha Trethewey. This is a collection of poems that are mostly about being African American in the American South, about being biracial, and I really enjoyed it. This is actually the second time I reread this collection this year. I read it back in, I think, March or April, and I completely forgot that I did. But really enjoyed this reread. And so yesterday, the 1st, I started on Fairy Tale by Hiro Mashima. Fairy Tale is one of my favorite manga series. It's set in a fantasy world in which, with wizards, people who can use magical powers, form guilds where they go on various missions. Fairy Tale is one of the most infamous guilds in the Kingdom of Fiori, and no member of Fairy Tale is more infamous than Natsu Dragneel. He travels around Fiori with his anthropomorphic cat companion Happy. So Natsu is this character here. This character here is Happy. In the first chapter, they meet a young wizard named Lucy Hartfilia, this young woman here. And after an adventure, Natsu invites Lucy to join Fairy Tale, which she does, and she quickly becomes friends with Natsu, and she joins him on his adventures, much to her chagrin. So I read the first 3 volumes. So this first volume covers Lucy's introduction to Fairy Tale and the formation of her partnership with Natsu and Happy. The second volume, the first part is about a mission that they go on together, and then the second half of the second volume and all of the third volume is another story arc that begins the formation of a bigger team that also includes the strongest woman in Fairy Tale, Urza Scarlet, and Natsu's frenemy, Grey Filibuster, which I will talk a bit more about on Monday when I do a more in-depth wrap-up of Fairy Tale. And I enjoyed these 3 volumes quite a bit. One thing I noticed, though, is not only how Mishima's style changes over the course of Fairy Tale, but also the characters, particularly Lucy. Lucy isn't... There's... The Lucy of the early chapters of Fairy Tale versus the Lucy of the later chapters of the end of the series. Lucy goes through a really amazing character growth, as well as wizard growth. Even though Lucy is the weakest member of this team, and she largely still remains relative to the other members, one of the weaker members, but she does grow amazingly throughout the series, which is one thing that I'm wanting to look at. But when I talk about Fairy Tale in more depth this year, I think I'm going to focus more on the story arcs. So look forward to that. Oh, speaking of, so I will be continuing Fairy Tale into the next reading week. It will be the majority of what I read for the next reading week. If everything pans out how I'm thinking it will, I will finish Fairy Tale on the 17th. And then I will get to the other manga series that I wanted to read after it. And then that Sunday, the 18th, I probably will do the December new releases. They should come in by then. Although I have not received any updates from book people whether they have shipped or not yet, which would give me only 2 full weeks to read everybody else on my January reading pile. And that ain't going to happen. So I think what I'm going to do is, let me move this one up to the front of the pile. So on Tuesday, my mother has a doctor's appointment. So what I'm going to try to do is, on Tuesday, I will take Tongues of Fire and Rapture's Road by Sean Hewitt with me to the appointment. And I will try to hopefully maybe read both of them while we're waiting for the doctor, as well as waiting for the bus to bring us home. If I can read both of these on Tuesday before returning to Fairy Tale in the afternoon, that would help quite a bit. And then maybe I could do some Fairy Tale in the mornings, like Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And then I can knock out Cat on a Hot Tin Roof by Tennessee Williams. And if that works out, I might have an easier time with the other 5 books that I want to get to. So, sorry about that. So I think that might work out, but I will report back on if that does or does not. Anyway, BookTube, that's all I have for this weekly reads. So until I see you next time, well, certainly next week, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.